participative mode, because if we can capture use cases in the discussions with the team here today, that would be great. And then we can replay this and document it and things of that nature. So I encourage anyone on our team as we go through this. I'm sure Dave will give us some opportunities to ask questions along the way. So please don't be shy, team. Let's ask and learn. All right, thanks.
Great, thanks, Tony. Yep, just started the recording, so we should be good, and I'll get that sent out whenever we wrap up. So appreciate it, and Dave, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so as I said a few times there, as I'm going through this, please just shout out any questions that you have. I can go off on tangents, go down any rabbit holes that you want to kind of explore as we're going through this. I'm going to give a little bit of a, let me share my screen out here, a little bit of a kind of a level set, because I know there's various varying familiarities with Migrate here on the call. So, let me just let that guy in. And share. And let me know when you can see this slide.
Yep, it's up.
All right, perfect. All right, so for those of you who aren't too familiar with Carbonite Migrate, this kind of gives you a little bit of an overview. The real beauty of it is that it is basically anything to anything. We can go physical to virtual, virtual to virtual, obviously physical to cloud, cloud to the ground, cloud to cloud. And the way we do that is we have our Carbonite client, our Migrate client, that runs on the server that you want to move to a new environment. And then on the other side, depending on how we're going to do it, you can have one over there if we're going physical to physical. If it's the virtual world, we have some capabilities that help simplify migrating to a virtual environment. If you're going to the cloud, we have some great capabilities about migrating to the cloud that I'll talk about a little bit later too. We're not tied to any specific hypervisor, unlike some of the other Migrate tools out there. So some tools out there are maybe great for VMware. Outside of that they can't really do much. We can really work with anything because we're working at that at the OS level. I'll talk a little bit more about how our Migrate technology works in a minute. But this one here, the ability to do non-disruptive testing, the ability to set up the whole thing without any adverse effects to your end users is really the key, kind of the magic sauce with our solution. We can get this set up. We can start the migration going. The users can still keep working away on the production systems while that data is synchronizing in the background. And as they're making changes, we're capturing those changes and sending them and applying them on the other side. So traditionally when you're doing a migrate, you have there's a lot of downtime involved. You've got to kick the users off. You got to make sure you have a nice static copy of that data that you can move over to the other side. That, depending on the data size, can take some time. So you're kicking people off. You're working on the weekends. You're working after hours. There's a lot of downtime involved. Whereas with Carbonite Migrate, the simple story is you set it up, it does its thing while people are still working away. During the week, it's synchronizing. 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, when you're ready to cut over to the other side, you click cut over. Within a couple of minutes, you're now running on the other side. You can do some testing and go home for the weekend. So it saves a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money, being able to simplify the migration process. Make sense so far?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So this breaks it down a little bit more here. So over here, you can see the OSs that we support, the hypervisors we support. We can go to any cloud platform, really. These are just the ones that we have some added code in our solution to help ease that transition. But we really can go anything to anything, because all you need to do is spin up a VM in any cloud service, and we can just migrate over to it. Okay. What are the more common migration kind of scenarios that you guys are seeing?
This Donnie, I mean, we see everything that's here pretty much on your screen. I mean, today I just got off a call. We're doing virtual to physical. We do a lot of physical to virtual. We do virtual to virtual. We do virtual to cloud. We're doing cloud back to on-prem. So we see a lot of it.
That's good. I mean, it's unusual to see virtual to physical. That's good. And also cloud back down to the ground. It happens, but it's unusual. So you guys are really seeing it all. That's good.
Yeah, I asked that question today, and I think because of the current conditions, you're seeing some smaller customers want to go back to physical for cost savings. So,
Okay, makes sense. All right. Pardon me. Let me actually let me break out of this slide here. I want to jump over to a different deck that has a bit more detail on how we do these migrations. Just give me 1 second here to flip over. If I can find it. It's the problem with working for a company for too long. You have way too many files. You can never find what you're looking for quickly. There we go.
It's a blessing and a curse.
It's a blessing and a curse, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I have it here. I just have to find the section that I'm looking for now. There we go. Okay, so is anyone familiar, or is everyone familiar with how we do the replication? Or is anyone familiar with how we do the replication, how it kind of works under the covers?
I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, where's that slide gone? All right. So I'm going to show you, these slides might be labeled a little off, just because we use the same replication engine for our high availability and our migration under the covers. Different functionality kind of laid on top of that, but the core engine is exactly the same. So the same technology that we're using to provide high availability disaster recovery on these physical and virtual servers or these cloud servers, we're using for migration. In fact, the whole reason that Migrate came about is because we found that customers were using our high availability tool to do migrations because it made it really easy, but they were paying a lot of money to do that because the availability license is perpetual, full license. So we kind of stripped out some of the kind of not unnecessary functionality, maybe added some things that I'll talk a little bit later that are specific to Migrate, and made it a project-based license or an on-demand based thing I think we can do as well. But let me share this out here. All right, so it says this is the replication engine that underpins all of this. And let me get my laser pointer out here. So first thing we do when we install this is, and just to kind of get some of the terminology straight for everybody, when we're talking this, we're talking source and target. The source is always the box that you're starting on. The target is where you want to end up. Pretty straightforward. When we first set this up, at least in a kind of a one-to-one relationship, I'll talk more about our cloud options and our hypervisor options a little bit later. But when you're just doing physical to physical, or you want to go from one server to another server in whatever environment that may be, the first thing we do is we do an initial mirror. All the mirror does is it goes and looks at this side here, looks at the source side, finds all of the data, and sends all of the data as fast as it can over here to the target side, just to get that initial bulk of data across. Okay. Skip on to the next little bit here. So the initial mirror, you can see here, copies all of that data across. All right. So once we get that initial mirror out of the way, this is where our filter level driver comes in. So we install a filter level driver between the OS and the disk to capture all of the bytes that are being written to disk real time. So you can see here, as the application, the user is writing data to disk. So the OS is telling the disk that this data is coming in. We're going to store that little block of data, those bytes here in our cache, and we're going to wait for a response back from the disk to confirm that data has been actually, committed to disk. We don't want to send it across unless we know it's being committed. As soon as we know it's being committed, we're going to send that data to the other side and apply it to the disk in the exact same way. So what this means, gives us quite a few advantages actually. One is we don't have to wait for the source to quiesce in any way to send that data across. If you've got some very busy applications out there that are constantly writing to disk, with some of the other Migrate solutions out there, you have to wait for that disk to quiesce, to calm down, so there's no writes going on there. So there can be a snapshot or some sort of baseline taken that can then be sent across. Whereas with us, it really doesn't matter. That disk can be, flailing away like crazy. Applications are writing to the disk. We're capturing those bytes as they're happening, and you can see we put them on, send them across the wire, and apply them here on the other side. Now we do have a cache and a queue that you can configure on this side to kind of mitigate if there's any networking issues between the source and the target. So we can store a little bit of history here of that data If the network goes down, we'll store it here. And then once the network comes back up, we'll flush it over here. If for some reason the network went down, or maybe the target went down, or something bad happened for an extended period of time, no big deal. We'll just do an initial kind of remirror again, just check both sides, see what they have, what the target size has, what it doesn't have. And then we'll just send over the changes, and then we'll keep doing the replication here. So you never have to start back at square one. No matter what happens to the environment, you're always going to be just picking up from the delta changes.
Just a quick question there.
Sure.
On one of the, I think the first slide you talked about the ability to test the target before doing the cutover. How does that work with the delta changes? Does it revert any changes that have happened like out of band while we were testing, or how does that work?
So we're still going to store the changes on the source side. And depending how long the test is going, when you come back up from the test, we're going to just flush. So you can see here, this is kind of illustrating here that the same situation, the network's down, the target is unavailable essentially when you're doing a test. We're going to store them here, and then when it comes back up, we'll flush them across. If your test goes for a long period of time and your buffer here, your queue runs out of space, and again, you can configure this to be, use as much or as little storage as you want. We use memory first, and then we'll write to disk, and you can configure that. But if it runs out of space, when the target comes back up again, we'll just do that remirror. You see what was left, and then we'll just send the changes across, and then we'll keep doing the byte level replication.
Okay, and any data that was written to the target as part of the test,
that will be lost.
Overwritten.
Yeah, that'll be lost. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Got it. Thanks.
Good. Let me skip through here. So this is just illustrating what I was talking about here. So we're writing it to memory first, and then we'll write it to the disk queue if it's down for a little bit longer. And then once everything comes back up, we'll flush everything across. Okay. Let me get out of here for a second. Actually, no, this next slide actually might be useful for you guys. So this is talking full server protection, which is more of an HA term. It's the exact same thing underneath the covers when we're talking migrate. When you're doing physical to physical, or you're doing one-to-one, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, but you're going from one server to another individual server. One of the concerns that you'll hear is, well, what happens? How can I have a copy of this over here? Won't there be conflicts? This server will be the same name, might have the same IP. How is it going to function when this box is already up and running? Isn't it going to conflict with my production environment? And the answer is no, right? And you can see here, you may be able to tell what we're doing. For regular data on the source side, we're going to write it in the exact same way on the target side. But for system data, we're actually going to write it to a staging area. So you can see here we have the staging area. Now you can configure this to sit on a different volume if you want. We don't necessarily recommend that, because when you do a failover, we're going to have to copy that data or move that data from one volume to another. And that obviously takes a bit more time than just renaming a directory kind of thing. But we'll write it to this staging area. And then on failover, we'll just simply flip the staging area into production. So if I click here on a couple of slides, that's a failback. You don't have to worry about the failback in migrates. But in the failover or cutover, so just again to get terminology a little straight, when we're talking HA, we're talking failover. The idea is that you may fail back at some point. When we're talking migrates, we're talking cutover. It's the exact same thing, just a different name for the same thing. But when we do a cutover in migrate, you can see we take the staging area and we write it into the system area of the source or the target box, and now it becomes the source box. So we write it in there, we do a reboot, and as it's coming back up, any files that were locked will replace them with whatever's in the staging area. So when that box comes back up, it's now the source box, right? The original source box is off, and now the target has become the source. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
First of all, I guess I should maybe step back a little bit. Am I telling you stuff you already know? Like, I know you guys are familiar with Migrate. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this if everyone is already aware of it, but I thought delving down into a little bit of how the replication works might be helpful if you aren't familiar with it.
No, I think it's helpful, definitely.
Okay, good. Okay. So that's, let me get out of here. That's how the replication works in full server. When I say full server, that's just our shorthand for one server to one server. We call it full server. The other option that you have, or one of the other options that you have, is let me scroll down here. Actually, do you guys do a lot of Linux migrations?
So far, I think every time I've used Carbonite, it's been on Windows.
Okay, all right. We do support Linux. I'll just show you this slide real quick, just to show you what it looks like. Exact same scenario, except this is obviously a Linux file system. Instead of writing to a staging, we write it to .dt staging, so a hidden directory on the target side. But it's the exact same process, and then we flip staging into production. That's for the one-to-one relationship. Now, when we're talking about hypervisors like VMware or Hyper-V, we have another little tool that we can use, or a little capability in there. So this is our console. I'm not sure if everyone's seen the console. I can show you this maybe a little bit later. But the nice thing about full server to ESX or full server to Hyper-V is that we have a little, what we call it a VRA, but it's just a little appliance, little VM that runs on the target side. So instead of having to have individual VMs spun up on the target side for all of the boxes that you want to migrate into that environment, we have this VRA, this little VM that's running there, that handles all of those incoming byte requests and can write them to multiple VMDK files as they're coming in for different VMs. So when you first create the job, we will create a VM configuration on the target side. We'll create the VMDK file. We will not turn that VM on. We will detach the VMDK file and attach it to this appliance that we're running. So then you have the VM configuration all ready to go, and you have the disk attached to something that's accepting and writing those bytes real time. Let me flip on to the next slide here. Writing those bytes real time from the source to the target. So here you can see there's the VM that's being created. We're going to detach that VMDK file or VHD file if it's Hyper-V. We still have the VM there ready to go. All of those byte changes are going to come across now and be written through our VRA, this little VM running here. Let me skip on to the next one. Written through that VRA and being written to this detached VMDK file. When you do the cutover, all we do is take it from here, attach it to that VM, and turn it on. So the migrate, literally, I mean, how long does it take to turn on a VM? A couple of minutes? That's how long the migrates you're going to be down for when you do that migrate in the virtual world. Obviously, the physical world takes a little bit longer because we have to, do the reboot. Obviously, rebooting of a physical box takes a bit longer. Flipping the staging over to production can take a little bit of time. So you can be, 10, 15 minutes kind of thing with downtime when you're doing a physical migration. When you're doing a virtual migration like this, it's a minute or two at most. And you can have, we're just showing one box here, but you would have multiple VMs all being serviced by this one VRA. And you can have multiple VRAs. If it's a really large environment, you can have multiple VRAs handling multiple jobs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The birds think so. Any questions? I know I don't want to move on from that if there's questions. Are there questions on how this is working? Is this something that anyone here has used in the past?
A couple of us did a few months ago for a project that we just did.
And how well did it work?
It worked pretty well. We did have a couple of issues. I don't have the scenarios off the top of my head, but we were able to call into support and get them resolved. Oh,
okay.
Licensing expiring was one of them. Yeah. They'd been running long enough to where we tried to flip the switch at 12:01 a.m., but the license expired at like midnight, and the destination wouldn't come back up, for instance.
Okay. Yeah. But and support was able to help you out, though.
Yeah, we got another license applied, and we were able to do it a couple days later.
Okay, good.
But it worked exactly like you explained it right here with the VRAs and everything.
Perfect. Great. Good. And the nice thing about this for the migrate is you don't have to have the resources running on the target side while you're doing this. It can sit everything's off over there. You're not wasting all those resources over there while that migrate is happening. And then once everything's in sync, you do that cutover. And again, not to go off too much of a tangent, exact same thing for our HA, except you have the ability to fail back in the HA environment. I won't go through the Hyper-V slides. It's the exact same thing, except it's a service because it's a Windows box over here. We don't need a VM, so it's just our service. But otherwise, it's the exact same thing. If you're doing, I don't know if you guys are doing Hyper-V migrations to Hyper-V, but it works exactly the same way. Okay. What I want to show you is our, here we go. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, I guess I can show you this here too while I'm looking for it. Obviously, we can do storage migration as well. So the head stays the same, but you're just moving the storage across. We don't have to do full servers. We can just do data migrations either between two separate boxes if you want to do data migration from site A to site B. We have a lot of customers who maybe have remote offices and they want to bring all of that data to head office as kind of a backup or to have it in a second spot. So we can replicate just the data back to a share or back to a central data location at HQ. Or you can do a data migration between, you're replacing the SAN on a box. You just plug in the new SAN, set that up as the target. Say you're going from, C, D, and E over here to F, G, and H over here. And then when you fail over, these will turn into C, D, and E kind of thing. Exact same process that works underneath the covers. Still that real-time byte level replication, still that zero user impact. The only downtime we'll have is when we're flipping the letters, basically, to rename the source or the target volumes to the source. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about our cloud migration portal. So, has anyone worked with our cloud migration portal?
Yeah, I've actually started some discovery on our end and actually set up a migration yesterday in it.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. And how did you find it?
I had to open up a support case. When I got to the final step, I got an internal 500 error.
Oh,
so I'm not sure what's going on.
Oh, okay. All right. I'd be curious to find out what's going on with that. I'll see if I can find out. Okay. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, we have a web portal that customers or you guys can use to help facilitate migrations to the cloud. In fact, let me step over to the next slide here so you can see kind of what it looks like. So, in fact, I can pull up the real one in a minute so you can see what it looks like for real. But what this does is it leverages the Migrate Carbonite Migrate client that's running in your source environment. It's leveraging that to facilitate migrates to the cloud. And in our cloud migration portal, we actually have code in here that helps, that understands Azure, understands AWS, and can help provision the VMs on the other side without you having to manually configure them. So if I come across to the next slide here, it doesn't really show you what I was hoping to see there. Okay, that's okay. I'll see if I can pull it up in the real thing. But what it does is it will, if you're going to AWS or say you're going to Azure, whatever, it will actually when you have your source, it reads what's in the source, the CPU, the memory, that kind of thing, and it'll pull up the appropriate template from Azure or from AWS of what it thinks the target should be. Now you're not tied to that. You can obviously change that, but if you keep the defaults, it's going to pick the template that closely matches the source side, so you don't have to go and configure that VM on the other side. You don't have to go and install the OS, patch it, all of that stuff. You just follow the wizard all the way through, and we'll provision it on the other side and start migrating that data across, just as we do with anyone else. It's still that same migration engine underneath the covers that gets that real-time replication, those bytes real-time over to the other side. I'll pull this up in a minute so you can see what it looks like for yourselves. So I'll skip past this for a second, but it is a very handy tool. You can go to this page right now and create an account and log in. There's no licensing to get in here. The only licensing comes from when we try to do the Migrate. It obviously has to talk to Migrate running on the ground or in wherever you have your source servers, and that's where the licensing comes in. It needs that Migrate license there. But other than that, there's no licensing to actually log in here and create an account. You can go in there and do that anytime and play around with it. I won't spend too much time on this last slide here, just to talk about, we do have PS. Sometimes you get into scenarios where maybe you'd like, someone to shadow you or someone to kind of hold your hand or, help with this because it's a complicated scenario. Maybe it's something you don't see on a regular basis. Obviously, we have a deep pool of talent and experience here. Double-Tick's been around for over 20 years now. We've guys in the PS team that have been there since basically the beginning. They've seen everything. So if you ever want to bring us in to kind of co-pilot one of these migrations or even run them for you, we're here to do that too. Has anyone worked with our PS team?
I have not.
Don't think we have yet.
Okay, no worries. So that's kind of the level set. I'll pull up some of the consoles here in a second, maybe if we have time to show you what things look like live. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the new stuff that we have in Migrate that you may not be aware of. And I'll start with, let me pull up my, I don't know where to go. Yeah, I'll start with this guy. So one new thing that we came out in our last release that you may not know about is our SQL Server modernization capability. Right, so we can actually migrate a SQL Server to a new box and upgrade it to a newer version of SQL at the same time. So as you know, you can see here, Microsoft has, dropped support for 2008. People are needing to migrate to a newer version of SQL, and we can help that in one easy step. So it does require a Migrate Premium license, not a, let me go back here. So we have, Migrate Standard, lets you basically do almost everything. Migrate Premium is kind of, they took Migrate and they took the HA stuff and kind of mashed them together a little bit. So there's a little bit of HA functionality built into the Migrate Premium, but there's also the SQL modernization job built in there as well. And if I skip onto the next slide here, this is what the console looks like. So you go and create a job. So has anyone not seen the console? Okay, great. So, you create your job and there's this new job option in here called SQL modernization. Has anyone done this one? Done a SQL modernization migrate?
No, this is all new to us.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Good. All right. So you can see here, we select our SQL modernization job on the left, and then over right here, this is our SQL box, and we just select whatever instances, databases we want to migrate across. Once we do this, it's basically the same thing as a regular migrate. We're doing those byte level captures. We're sending that data across. Once we have everything in the sync, we're sending those changes across real time as the users are working on the production box. When you're ready to do the cutover, we do the exact same stuff that we normally do during a migrate cutover, except once the cutover is completed, say you're running 2008 on your source side, we migrate it over, you have 20, whatever, 16, 19 to now on the other side. We're migrating it over, to the 2008 version of the database while the migrate is happening. Once you do the cutover, we're actually going to call some internal SQL processes to do an in-place upgrade of that database to whatever version of SQL is running on the target side. And then the target becomes the source running, instead of 2008 SQL, it's running 2016 SQL.
Is it bringing over like stored procedures, things like that, or is this just the database only?
It will bring over everything that you want it to. So, and Eric, maybe you can help a little bit with this. If anyone wants to play around with this, if you guys have a lab in your environment, you want to see how this looks, I'm sure we can provide some Migrate Premium temp licenses that you can play around with just to see how it looks, how it feels, kick the tires on it a bit before you roll it out into your customer base. Or if you wanted, if you had an opportunity right now and you wanted us to kind of shadow you, or our PS team to come in and help with the first one, kind of teach you how to do this, we can obviously do that too.
Yeah, I'll mention it to our SQL guy, see if there's anything he wants to play around with it. But it might be of interest to us.
Cool. Okay. So we did add some Azure capabilities. We actually if I skip over to the next slide here, we're in the Microsoft Azure App Store. So we're certified to migrate into Azure. In fact, Microsoft recommends us for some cases. I have another slide deck that I'll show you in a second on this. But there are certain use cases that the native Microsoft tools just cannot function with. They can't get you up to Azure if you're in certain scenarios. That's where we come in. We can help with that. Are you familiar with the licensing changes that we've done, where we're now all source-based licensing as opposed to source and target? I'm not sure if that's something that's of interest to you guys.
I wasn't aware.
Okay, so recently, I think it was 8.1 or 8.2, we changed how we do our licensing. So traditionally, you had to have a license for the source, you had to have a license for the target. That can get a little complicated, a little unwieldy, and it kind of seems that maybe a little bit overly complicated, right? So we've turned it into just source-based licensing now. So you just have to license the source. The target will automatically get licensed, or you don't have to purchase a license for the targets. You just have to license the source side. So it makes that licensing a little bit easier to manage and maintain.
That's nice to hear. I know on one of our recent projects that was around 1,000 servers, we would have some failed cutovers and need to remigrate. So yeah, that would have simplified the licensing a lot. So that's great to hear.
Oh, good. I'm glad that's good news to you. Good. All right, let me pull up the last thing I want to show here for the new stuff. I guess I could show this. If you do a little bit of, let's throw this over here for a second. If you do a little bit of Linux migrations, we have added some new stuff for Linux here to help make those go a little bit faster. One of the big things that we had in Linux that was a bit complicated was that staging area was hard coded into the client. You couldn't change it. Now you can. So that could cause some problems if the staging, if the root volume wasn't very large, if that initial volume wasn't large. So we allow you to change that now. That's probably the big one. But what I really want to show is our new Azure stuff here. All right, so I won't go into. All right, so actually, I will start here. So this is some of the improvements that we've added to our Migrate tool for Azure. One of the big ones here is UltraDisk. We support UltraDisk. ASR, I don't think it does yet. It may have just recently added it, but at least last time I checked, it didn't. So we can utilize UltraDisk. We can utilize Azure Stack. We can do anything to anything really. So these are some of the reasons why Microsoft recommends us to complement ASR. Right, so ASR can do a lot of things. If you have really large environments, maybe 80% of that environment can be handled by ASR, but there's a few outliers. To simplify that, that's where we come in to complement Azure Site Replication. Let me skip here a little bit. I just want to get into some of the functions here. So same thing that we're talking about in the, in any of our scenarios, non-disruptive testing, zero user impact while the migrate's happening, consolidate workloads, bring things together. You can, if you wanted to bring files from many servers into one new file server in Azure, you can absolutely do that. You can consolidate everything into one box if necessary. You can split things out into separate boxes as well. You can have that source sending data out to different boxes if you wanted to split that up. It was getting too large or unwieldy to deal with. Okay, so you can see here we're really here to complement ASR. So we specialize in some of these unique enterprise level migration scenarios, really large workloads. with the critical cutover. So we need very little downtime. We've got a lot of data we need to get across, but we don't want any downtime or very little downtime. That's where we can come in, because we can replicate 4+ terabytes of data in the background. People are still working away. Everything's going good. Let the job just do its thing. And then when you're ready to cut over, you click the cut over, and within a few minutes, now you're running up in Azure. We already talked about the SQL Server upgrading, consolidation. You can actually migrate multiple databases into a single instance as well if you want to consolidate your SQL. Or if you want to split it up, you can do the same thing as well. We already talked about the byte level replication. That's kind of our secret sauce. That's the replication engine there. And then we did talk about how we can migrate into Azure Stack and utilize UltraDisk and all of that. Any questions on are you guys doing a lot of Azure migrations today?
Yeah, we do a fair amount of them.
Okay, so like I said, we are certified by Microsoft to do this. Obviously, their go-to is going to be ASR, but they recognize that ASR can't do everything, and they have said that if we can't do it, then Carbonite can do it, or OpenText now can do it. Call those guys, bring us in to help close that loop.
Yeah, the thing is that from what I've looked at for like the Azure Migrate projects and things like that, we can use both tools in conjunction with the Azure assessment and use it all within the same portal, correct?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. Cut over to here. This is just showing you we can do basically anything to anything. It's a similar slide that we showed before. This is just, I want to kind of just spend a little bit of time here. Exact same technology that's underneath the covers when we're going to Azure. It's just that the target is being hosted up in Azure. Right, so it's the same workflow. The bytes are coming in here. Our filter level driver is capturing that data, sending it across, applying it here real time. Really, the only difference between box A and box B is the latency between them. So it's near zero downtime when you do that cutover. Or near zero, you don't have to wait for a whole bunch of data to get replicated across before you do that cutover. It's already in sync.
Gotcha.
What are you here? What time is it? Oh, well, we've only got a few minutes left. Okay, let me let's see, what do we have time for here? Yeah, I'm going to show you our. Yeah, I can share out some of these slides later on too, because we've only got a few minutes left. Let me pull up my console here. Okay, so this is what the Migrate console looks like, the cloud console. This is not the on-premise version. So when you install our Migrate software, there's an on-premise console that you get, right? That's installed on the client, or you can install it separately on your laptop so you can manage multiple systems. But this is specifically for when you're migrating to the cloud. So if I come across here to our dashboard, there's nothing really set up in here right now. But if I wanted to do a migration, you can see this is what we support here. Right, so I can pull it from here or send it to basically any of these here. You can see we have custom options. So if there are some scenarios, if they're going to a non-standard cloud, or some sort of cloud provider that's not Azure or VMware or AWS, we can still accommodate that by using the custom option. You notice there's a proxy here. Obviously, a lot of these servers are behind firewalls, so we spin up a proxy behind that firewall to facilitate this guy communicating behind the firewall, being able to read that information, so it can present it here in the list of servers. Okay, but as I said, you can come to this page today. You can log in if you have some Migrate licenses, some temp licenses there, some test licenses, some NFRs, and you want to play around with this. Just go to migrate.doubletake.com, sign up for an account, and then you can just go through here and play around with it. And if you're going through this and you have any questions, by all means, think of me as a resource for technical stuff. You can reach out and ask me questions. I'm happy to answer them. If I don't know, I'll find the answer. Obviously, support is there if it's more of a production, real world thing. But if you're just kicking tires and playing around with this and you're not sure, just shoot me an email. Hey Dave, what's this, or how does this work, or how do I do this? I'm happy to help. That's basically it. I know we've got about 15 minutes left here. I mean, I can go off on, drill down into some other things if you guys have questions that you'd like to know, or specific scenarios that you've dealt with in the past that you're wondering how we could handle them. Any questions at all?
I honestly don't have any questions. Sorry.
Yeah, no
Anybody
worries.
else?
Like I said, if you do think of something after the fact, just send me an email. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Just kind of picking up on the SQL modernization feature you showed us.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like for a transformation when migrating, say, a Windows 2008 box and then upgrading to 2016? For previous projects, we've, on the night of the cutover, then done an in-place upgrade while the source was offline, and then if doing the in-place upgrade on the target, and then if that's successful, then we can rejoin Active Directory, join the domain. It's the same machine, Bob's your uncle. Is that the strategy for moving forward if you're doing an in-place upgrade, or are there any features that can help with that?
Yeah, so for OS upgrades, obviously it's a little bit different. So I'm just so I can be clear on what you're doing before. You're doing the migrate, you do the cutover to the target, and then you do the in-place upgrade of the target while it's disconnected from the network, make sure everything's good, and then plug it back in. Is that right?
I think it is. Shimmy, you
Yeah.
could clarify there on the process we were using, but I think that's correct.
Yeah, we're doing the cutover, and then we need to do a name change on the actual server, upgrade it to 2016. And we were doing this for the 1,000 servers you talked about earlier. Do you guys have anything that would help in this instance, or is that it? Just
So it depends on the kinds of workloads that you're migrating across. So if you have to bring the whole server across, we can't obviously do. You see the way we do the replication where we're writing the system information to a staging area. So the OSs have to be at the same basic level. Now they don't have to be the same edition, but they have to be at the same OS level. So 2008 to 2008, 2016 to 2016. Just because when we flip that staging to production, if you flip a 2008 staging into a 2016 production, you're going to have problems, right?
Right.
So for those kinds of scenarios, you'd want to just do the straight migrate across, and then you can do the cutover. That new box should have the same name as the original, should be exactly the same as the source, and then you just do your upgrade as you normally would on the new target, or the new source, I mean. If this whole server doesn't need to be migrated across, if it's a file server, for example, and you just need to migrate the data across, they don't have to be the same OS at all. You can have 2008 on the ground and 2019 in the cloud, because we're just migrating the data, so there's no system information involved, right? And then when you do the cutover, we can actually fail over, obviously the networking, we can fail over the share names, the NetBIOS name, all of that stuff. And when you do that cutover, so that all of that information should be now on the target side. If you need to do any additional stuff, we have pre and post scripts that you can put in there. So if you need to do any additional work on that box before it becomes truly a production box, you can do some pre-failover scripts and post-failover scripts to do renames or networking stuff or whatever you need to do. But all of that data can be brought across between two separate OS types or two separate OS versions. Right. So if it's just a file server, now, like I said, if it's a full server, that's a different story. But file servers, a file share job, absolutely can go between different OSs. I'm not sure if that's a scenario that you guys have been working with.
We did both. The majority of them were taking the entire machine and replicating it over, and then doing an in-place upgrade. But we did have some file servers from different locations that we just replicated the data to a newer OS. Because it was, like you said, it was just a file server.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's exactly it. So, yeah, it just unfortunately the way the system information works, you just can't do from an old OS to a new OS or from different OS versions, but the file stuff can absolutely be replicated across between different OS versions.
Got it.
Any other questions? Okay. If you think of anything, I know, after these, when I've been on the other side of these calls, I hang up and about an hour later, it's like, oh, shoot, I should have asked. By all means, just send me an email. I'm happy to answer whatever you have. If you want to do an email call or just call me, whatever it takes.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. So, guys, I'll get this recording sent over once we wrap up here. And like Dave mentioned, yeah, definitely reach out with any questions. We're here to help and be helpful resources for you guys moving forward. And if we could work a little bit closer hand in hand on these projects, please let us know. Like Dave mentioned, we have our services team that could do the migrations as a service if you guys need help, or if you have a question, just feel free to hit Dave or the team up. More than happy to assist you guys. So definitely want to thank you guys for the time here. Like I said, I'll get the recording sent out, and then if any questions come up, definitely reach out, and hopefully we'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks Eric and Dave for the presentation today.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.